Welcome to You Can't Make This Shit Up.
You can't.
I'm your host, Joel Hoxley, your host, David Washington. We're at the Oxford Sports Pub and Secret Society in Altamont Springs.
All right, all right.
Welcome to another edition. Let's get right to the point. So, today, David, we want to talk about 4 reforms that have been suggested for our political system. And before I say that, I want to kind of give you this to think about.
Okay.
In 1796, when President George Washington was giving his farewell speech, he said these words: "However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion." Woo!
Sounds like President Nostradamus.
Well, and the funny thing
Quite
is,
the prediction.
he had two partisans that helped him write this.
Okay.
So it's funny. But the 4 reforms we're going to talk about, David, the open primaries, ranked choice voting, final 4/5 voting, and the nonpartisan election redistricting.
Right. The issue is that about 20 to 25% of our electorate are the only ones who are voting. And the parties know this. And the parties take advantage of this fact. So when you have 20 to 25% of those eligible to vote in our elections deciding who will represent the larger community, there's a big problem in that you have special interests doing what special interests do with special interest dollars, focusing on the extremes of the parties. And so what we're trying to do here, talk about here, is several reforms that have been proposed to bring in more of the electorate into performing their civic duties.
There's never any change to the general election. It's always a change to, the primary election.
Mhm.
So like in New Hampshire, when you go into New Hampshire, you can change your registration from Democrat to Republican right up to the moment that you go to vote.
Mhm.
So you can walk in. Now, that gives you the opportunity to say, which party do I want to vote for? So no independent is left out. However, they have to go into a party and they can exit the party as soon as they walk out.
So that will fall into the first recommended reform of open primaries, sort of.
It's sort of like an open primary. The only thing that's closing it is it's still in two partisan. There's 2 partisan elections going on. You get to choose which one you want to be in.
Right.
But an open primary would simply be everybody's on the ballot. The top 2 get to go to the general election. That I don't support at all.
Right.
That one I don't support because in a state like Florida, you Democrats get shut out other than in the cities. So all of a sudden, the top 2 are always going to be Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And in the cities, the top 2 are going to be Democrats. That's what you're sending to the general election? I mean,
so the open primary would be something like this, if I get this correctly. So regardless of political affiliation, everyone is on one ballot.
Correct.
And so determining the voter will decide, and this is where they'll have other options, other reforms will come into play. They'll either decide the top 2, the top 4, the top 5,
No,
or
that's the
whatever.
difference.
But every wait, no, I'm just saying in the open primary of this particular reform, everyone is on the same ballot
Everybody's on the same ballot.
and everyone's eligible to vote. For it.
Everybody's eligible to vote. I do believe this one has the 50% rule.
Okay, okay.
So you don't have to go to the general election if you get 50 plus one.
Okay, okay.
But the top two
We'll
move on.
forward. Okay.
Right. Because it has to be two candidates in the general election. It would be the two candidates that come out of that section.
Right. So it's like a
Like a county
general
commission.
election
It's
inside
like a county. It's like a
primary.
county. Like
Right.
a county commission county commission vote.
Yes, exactly.
But it's not nonpartisan. It is partisan, but
everyone is
you
on
can
the
see
same
what
ballot.
parties they're in.
Right.
And you know what happens here, parties are always going to win
Mm-hmm.
because there's always going to be a system that they can use. And this one they would stack. This is what we call, stacking the deck, or adding candidates in to make it more difficult. So it would be, you see a lot of fake candidates coming in that are Democrats that aren't really Democrats, and then you'll have Republicans that aren't really Republicans.
Right. And a good campaign will weed that out. I think a very well strategized campaign will inform voters that, hey, I'm the true Democrat in this, or this person is the true Republican in this race. These are pretenders. And like using the county commission races here in Orange County, you have a whole sort of candidates who are eligible to run, regardless of political persuasion. And based on the merits of their strategy and their campaign, if they make it, that's great. If they're able to speak to the whole electorate and garner their support and vote, then they move forward.
So, David, have you ever gotten a call to say, hey, this race only has two Democrats in it. Have you thought about maybe being a write-in candidate for this position? And it's like, why would I want to be a write-in candidate? Because it's free, Joel. It's free, David.
Right.
So that's to lock
that.
That's to lock up a primary, so that it just goes with the Democrat winning automatically.
Right.
Because
and we've seen
nobody
that.
knows who the write-in is.
Exactly. And we've seen that before. And there's been some pushback publicly about that. And also some lawsuits, particularly out of South Florida, and a former representative, Artiles. Yeah. Yep.
That was pure paid to play.
And ain't that the truth?
So I think that you're looking at a primary that's similar to a county commission race, but the parties will be indicated on there on the ballot.
So the next reform that's been proposed, discussed, is ranked choice balloting. And so in ranked choice voting balloting, you have, if I understand correctly, you have a slate of candidates, and voters will rank their first choice, their second choice, and so forth and so on.
I think it's only your first three choices. I don't think you have to choose a number for everybody.
Okay, let's say.
I do believe it's like 1 and 2, or it's 1, 2, and 3.
Depending on how it's set up.
I'm pretty sure it's you can choose the top 2 that you want, and then they count who has the most votes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the most votes in 2 and you don't have the most votes in 1, then you technically.
We'll use your example, but to make it easier for me, we'll use 3. So you rank 1, 2, 3.
Right.
So candidate A gets you rank that person as 3. Candidate B, you rank that person 2. Candidate C, you rank that person as your number 1 choice. And other voters do the same thing. So whoever has the most number 1 votes, first choice votes. No. So help me wrap my brain.
No, go ahead. I'm trying to think of it.
So if you take the number of votes for number one, and let's say candidate C had the most votes for first choice.
Make it 33. So let's do this. Make it 33.3, 33.3, 33.3.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying, right?
I get
Say
you.
it's a tie in number one,
Okay.
which is impossible, but it's pretty close. But number two ranks just as well as number one.
Okay.
So if you get, so you and I vote number two as the same person, and
Right.
everybody votes for that person as number two. Say he gets 80% of the vote as number two,
Right.
and one doesn't give you a solid person,
Okay.
then number two goes forward.
Okay. There you go.
So that's how it would. Still going to have to run against each other, but the ranking gives you the opportunity that you could be like everybody's second choice, and now you're the guy that's in there, or the woman
Exactly.
that's in there.
Exactly.
So this is a very unique one. It can play a very strong role.
Right.
I support this one probably more than any other.
Right.
But who's doing the math?
Exactly.
That's
And
where
that's the piece that I mean, I kind of, very cautious. You're right. Who's doing the math? And for the average voter, well, we grow up thinking, okay, I voted for this person. That was the only person I voted for, and we move on. And so it does get confusing. And as you saw, it gets a little bit confusing for me with the ranked choice voting. And I've had people explain to me over and over, I'm like, okay. And we do this for a living. How about for someone, the casual voter? That's difficult.
Yeah,
But I do see the merits in, ranked choice voting. And hopefully you, the viewer or the listener, do also. Next, we have final four or final five voting. So,
yeah, this one again, it's similar to the first one, except you're pushing the top four into the general election.
right.
Now, what happens is you end up with the general election that doesn't have a clear winner, and that ends up most times you'll have to have a runoff. Why would you want the extra expense? Because you're pushing four people to the top, and one has to get 50% of the vote in the general election. You're basically setting yourself up to having two primaries. Your general election could look like a primary, very few winners.
And we'll explore this a little bit further because this is a unique concept that has been promoted most recently. And I kind of lean towards this reform as one of my favorites because it is new, it is innovative. And we, as the political innovators, we like to see new opportunities to engage voters and increase people's involvement with their civic duties.
You would not get any support from the parties on this one. Again, because
Exactly.
the top two could be Republican. You can have all four become Republicans.
Right.
You could have no Democrat get in there at all. Now you're just all of you guys are all of everybody's voting for those four Republicans. Which one's the worst of the worst? I mean, that's which one's the best of the worst. Let's say it that way. So, but again, I would see the parties would really push back on this.
Final four, final five is kind of a combination of open primary and ranked choice.
Yep.
And it's the hope that you'll get a better candidate, a better elected out of this particular process. And we'll explore that a little bit more later.
I'm sure, but the thing is, when you get to the results, again, people are already confused when somebody wins that they didn't expect to win.
Mm-hmm.
So this has that same fluctuation where people go, how did that person get in? How did they go from getting this and still making it in? Had two things pushing them up.
Right.
Again, it's confusing to the voter. The end result they could like or not like. So
it's even more confusing when we don't have active civic education in our schools anymore. Very, very limited opportunities for understanding our civic duties. But that's
They barely
we'll
know
dig
it.
into that a little bit later too.
They barely know any name on the ballot except the top.
Right, right.
So
That's true. And then the final reform is redistricting, specifically nonpartisan redistricting. And that, of course, has been the talk of this most recent session of the United States Supreme Court.
a lot of this comes from, you know, do we take the power away from the legislature and put it into a nonpartisan type,
Yeah.
redistricting? So when districting is done, it's done in a totally different manner. I still see this as who they put on the board or how they get on the board. There's going to be so many Democrats, so many Republicans, and so many independent or MPAs, right? You then leave out the Green Party. You leave out everybody's going to they have to be voters, right? Or
They have to be voters. Yeah.
The board construction is the same thing. Somewhere along the line, somebody's going to have more power than somebody else. It's still going to become out partisan.
With all the technology that's out there, there's a way to redistrict districts where the
The programmer wins.
yeah, the program way. The deviations are not so radical, And I know with the recent Supreme Court case in regards to the Alabama redistricting issue, the Republicans went back, created a map that still did not satisfy what the Supreme Court discussed in their decision. They went back again, still didn't resolve the issue. So the Supreme Court may have to decide to do it themselves.
Yep. So David, how about this? If you computer has randomization, right?
Sure.
If you just say, I need this many voters under each congressional congressman, no more than 10% above it or 10% below it, you put that in the system, you would eliminate, you might have one black district. So you're going to have to put programming in there.
Yeah.
That's going to have to maintain those black districts instead of being totally random and saying, okay, these are fair. These are fair because they're the right number. They're not one leaning one way or the other. And your lines will be really funny looking.
I mean, we do have some funny, weirdly drawn districts already.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's criteria, of course, that the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, requires, and of course that could be put into a formula algorithm for a system to do this. I know Michigan has been successful in having the nonpartisan board to create their new districts, which led to the Democrats getting control of their state legislature, their state senate, and the governors.
Correct. So the Democrats took over through the system saying it's nonpartisan, but it was actually Democrats that wrote.
No.
At the end, if you look at their political affiliation or where they lean, it's nonpartisan, but it always ends up leaning one way or another.
It was a map that met
the Democrats' approval because it got Democrats approved.
Remember, the Republicans.
How far did they lose? How far did they lose?
What do you mean? How far did they lose?
See, you took it out of the legislature's hand so that you could get the
legislature that was dominated by Republicans who had
correct,
and it was found to be gerrymandered.
But I'm saying, David, it's no different It's no different. You just want
When a
you came up
nonpartisan
with a you
group
came up
comes
with a
up with a
way.
map that was,
It wasn't fair. It
how
was
was it not
because it
fair
leaned
when
Democrat.
it
Every
was,
single one of them leaned Democrat.
because the state
So every single
voted for Democrats because the Republicans failed to deliver.
no, that's not the case.
Ah, come on,
That's
come
not the
on.
case. If you say every single district is got 10% more Democrats in it, I mean, the majority is going to come out.
I don't think Dearborn, Michigan has.
If you look at those, if you
more
look at those districts,
Democrats.
if you look at those districts, they are not. They are
No,
not a single. That
no,
very few
no.
of them lean.
The
to
Republicans
Republican.
just couldn't deliver on their agenda.
I don't think so.
It was a hot mess.
You
You
went.
can't say a nonpartisan redistricting was the cause. The
I don't
failure.
think there's anything such.
I think the Republicans contributed to their lack of success.
Yeah, David. I don't think. Here's the problem, and I'm not disagreeing with you in the way that you think I am. I'm trying to say there is no nonpartisan. Everybody has a partisan
Not
lean.
purely.
You can't
nonpartisan.
find. You
I
can't
don't
find.
think we can.
You
We
can't
can't
find.
expect perfection.
You can't find 6 hermits that know nothing about, you know, Democrat or Republican and come in and sit in a room and say, yeah, let's just draw fair lines.
However, if it meets the criteria of the VRA and of a legislature that votes on this map and its judiciary and the Supreme Court, is closer to being nonpartisan than the previous map. You have to agree with that.
David, I read the bill that we were trying to put forward that said there would be so many Republicans on the board, there'd be so many Democrats on the board, there'd be so many MPAs on the board. And the problem was when you look at the MPAs, both parties came out to go against this legislation because both parties didn't want the primaries to change.
Which legislation is it? Which state? Florida?
Florida. It was they were trying to change the Constitution on voting.
Okay, I'm not familiar with
I'll
that
look that one up.
legislation.
I'll look it up. But yeah, again, if you read how the board was going to be structured and everything, it sounds really
Right.
cool, fair. But MPAs, I don't. People realize that MPAs do have a leaning.
Of course they do. Yes.
And sometimes
yes.
you could see that they actually were in a party at one time.
Right. Exactly.
And then became MPAs. So
right.
you can tell what they're innovative, the way we are innovating today.
Right.
I can take your market data and make a selection. If the governor's making a selection, I could have somebody do market data and say, okay, these guys lean to the right. So these will be the MPAs we put in. Who's going to choose those people on the board? Like one gets chosen from this place. Very confusing, but I see how it could work in a perfect place.
Right.
I just don't see perfect. I see every one of us scheming to get ahead. You see it every time you go to these partisan things.
And you will hope that there are checks and balances. But my final thought, I just want to add this. The 4 systemic reforms hope to put an end to the ruinous competition that we see right now in our elections. Open primaries force all candidates to run in the same election. Ranked choice voting helps select candidates who have support across a wider swath of voters and can help independents get elected. Final 4, Final 5 voting combines an open primary and ranked choice voting that offers voters more and better candidate choices, and nonpartisan election redistricting obviously tries to stop politicians from choosing their voters by manipulating district maps.
Every single one of these is implemented in some other location. California has one of these.
Alaska,
the
ranked choice in Alaska.
I mean, when Sarah Palin, runs and loses, that's kind of interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, David, I I wish there was a way. I wish there was a way, but I just don't see the parties giving up control.
You got to see, you got to, and see, and that's the problem. The parties are in control, and this is an effort to take the power away from the parties and bring it back to you, the voter.
Like, share, just tell us that we're wrong or right. It doesn't matter.
I think we're right.
But
all
you
the
need to
time.
subscribe. You need to subscribe so you can get what you can't make this shit up.
Exactly. Prove us wrong. We're out.